Change your heart, change your life, change the planet.
Hi everybody, it's Tim Van Orden. Today I want to talk about self-confidence and how it can actually get in the way of getting what you want. But before we dig into this, we have to define what it is that you want. What are your goals and why do you have them? In my research, I found three different types of self-improvement goals. One, you simply want to feel better about yourself, which is self-esteem. Two, you want to feel more confident or less afraid, and you want to be more approach-oriented. Or three, you want to be more effective in more situations, which is self-efficacy. I'm a big fan of developing the third option, self-efficacy. And here's why. Because self-esteem is simply about liking yourself. It's about estimating your value. Esteem and estimation have the same root. So high self-esteem simply means that you evaluate yourself highly, and low self-esteem means that you evaluate yourself lowly. In other words, you don't see that you have a whole lot of worth. But in relation to what? Or in relation to whom? Everyone? My family? My friends? My love interests? My cultural expectations? Who is it in relation to, and to what situations? This one or all situations? It's also about time. Is it about my former self and a comparison to what I used to do, my glory days? Or about this glorious future self, this ideal self that I know I should be, if only I could get out of my way? So the biggest problem with self-esteem is that it's relative and arbitrary. But yet, the high self-esteem movement of the latter part of the 20th century and the beginning of this one was all about helping kids to raise their self-esteem, to feel good about themselves no matter what they did and no matter what anyone said about them. Everyone's a winner, and we can't make anybody feel like they're somehow not as good as anyone else. And the intentions here were good, but the data shows that the results are not good. High self-esteem leads to a sense of entitlement and fragility, both individually and collectively. So what about the second goal here, to be more self-confident? That's better, right? Well, let's take a look. Self-confidence is a belief. It's a feeling of knowing that you are superior to the situation that you're in. So you have faith that you are above and beyond whatever it is that's confronting you, whether it's another person or whether it's a situation. And you don't need evidence to back it up because it's a feeling, it's faith. And what happens here is you get fixed in your behaviors and your beliefs, and this leads to conflict. So the third option, self-efficacy, is by far the best in my opinion. And here's how it differs. Both self-esteem and self-confidence are self-centered mindsets. In both cases, the self is playing the central role and the world is simply the background. It's the stage in which they arise. So with self-esteem, the world validates the self, and with self-confidence, the world entertains or supports the self. But that's not what the self was for. It's not to be celebrated or protected. We developed or evolved a self to keep us in a group, to keep us cooperating with that group and to protect our bodies through that cooperation. So I believe that self-efficacy is a much, much more powerful use of the self-tool. And that's right, self is a tool. You see, self is meant to process the world around us and to integrate ourselves into that world as we process it. But instead, we've become the focus of the processing. We've gone from having a mind's eye that simulates the world to having a mind's eye, individual identity, which is disconnected from the world. So the goals that we create that are about raising self-esteem or self-confidence are much more self-serving, and they're very different than the goals that we set when we simply want to increase our effectiveness. Because goals driven by a desire to raise self-esteem are very fragile goals. What is the ultimate goal of the goal? Is it to be celebrated or valued higher? Usually it is. But what if the means that you have to achieve that ultimate goal, like running a marathon, what if you do it and nobody cares? It's the caring that you wanted, not the marathon. So suddenly all that work has been done for nothing and you feel empty. And this leads to a defensive posture. Well, I didn't need them anyway. I don't need anybody's approval. I don't need people to validate me. But you do. That was your goal. And then down the road, this leads to greater and greater isolation. We close ourselves off to the world, to input, to connection and relation. In fact, we close ourselves off to the very things that are required for growth and fulfillment. But I'm not talking about the growth of our ego and our sense of personal resolve, because not all growth is good. Cancer is growth. Deviance is growth. Not good. But what I'm talking about here is the kind of growth that can only occur when you plug yourself in and you play with others as part of the group rather than apart from the group. To move from being self-centered to self-entered. And developing a sense of self-efficacy is how you turn this around. It's not an arbitrarily anchored estimation of your value like self-esteem is. Nor is it the comfort that you get from being fearless because you have a faith in your superiority, such as self-confidence. Instead, self-efficacy is about opening yourself up to what is. It's about examining the evidence and how it applies to you. And then, most importantly, assessing your previous experience in similar situations and coming up with a plan of action. What's showing up and how skilled am I at dealing with it based on what I've done in the past. So there is a component of self-knowledge, but it's not grandiose and it's not unwavering, it's not fixed. It's knowledge that can only be obtained through vulnerability, through trial and error, through a willingness to place a small bet and possibly lose again and again and again. You see, we didn't come into this world fully formed. We began as a single cell, and over the course of decades, we developed, we grew in response to the pressures in our environment. And our bodies are masters of this type of growth, but our minds, they find this type of growth not only to be absurd, but to be intolerable. But this is what works. Plugging yourself in and experimenting, or as Seth Godin says, poking the box. You want to know how to work this box? Poke it, see what happens. Put something into it, see what happens. Take something out of it, see what happens. Experiment, be willing to fail. Because if you fail a little bit, because you've taken a little risk, you're going to learn something. You don't want to jump entirely into the box. You just want to poke it. A little bit of risk, a little bet, and a little potential failure that then gives you input that you can incorporate into yourself as you move forward. So the next time you're looking for videos about raising self-esteem or reading books about increasing self-confidence, keep this in mind. If you really want to be effective, if that is your ultimate goal, you have to be willing to look bad a little bit. You have to be willing to fail a little bit. And if you're trying to protect your esteem or you're trying to protect your confidence and think you're superior to every situation, then you can't learn because you don't ever allow yourself to get into a situation where not only you can fail, but you should fail. Because when you fail, your beliefs have been challenged. And when your beliefs are challenged and you allow that to percolate into you, you learn. If you don't ever allow information in, if you don't ever allow failure in, how could you possibly learn? So, self-efficacy for the win. Become more effective by letting down your guard, by opening up, being vulnerable, and failing a little bit at a time as you poke that box. All right? I hope there's some value in there for you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like this channel, subscribe. And if you really like what I'm up to and you want to see more of this, come on over to Patreon. $1 or $2 a month really helps me out, and I get to produce more videos like this. As always, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.